Alright, howdy folks, welcome back to Top Comics Pressing. In this video, what we're going to do is another pre-screen here of a nice stack of modern comics. These range from about 1990 all the way up to kind of current, and the submission sheet on these requested about that 9698 threshold. And so again, we're going to use a very high bar for deciding which books to accept or decline, or at least flag for the owner. One comment I do have is that I know a lot of people like these resealable bags and boards because they save you any trouble from the tape. I will say I'm not a fan of these. I know people like them. They do have nice utility because they kind of self-seal. My concern with them is that if you accidentally, let's say, leave this up on your table and then you put a comic over it, you're going to stick that comic right to the bag and the board. And that can be a bummer. It's happened to me a couple times, never with a client's book, but it has happened on the PC, especially when I'm trying to shuffle, weekly pulls into a box as fast as I can. And because of that, I personally have discontinued using these resealable bags. What I do is get the old-fashioned kind with a flap, and I use the painter tape. And the reason I use the painter tape is if you stick it to a comic book, it has a pretty high probability of peeling right off without damaging the book. Obviously, you want to try to avoid doing that, but the 1 out of 1,000 times it happens, you have a pretty good opportunity to rescue that book using the blue painter tape or green painter tape. But these resealable flaps, I think, are much more adhesive to a comic book cover, and because of that, I kind of discourage using them. All right, that's me for my soapbox. Let's get on to the comics. So these are the so-called virgin books. If we flip them on over, so for moderns at 9.8, the easiest way to decline one is look at the corners and look right down the spine. And more often than not, the place you want to look is right down the rear spine. And in this one, in that glare there, we can see a bunch of ticks up there. Now, some of those might press out, but you can kind of see them down there, especially right in here. And if we zoom in, you can see white specks there. And so these are now clear color breaks. And so those will never be able to get a 9.8 on this book. That's the staple, and if we look up here, we can see another white tick right there. And then, so ones like this one here might press out, but ones like that one definitely have that color break. And you can see that down here as well, especially on the lower part. So this one, if I pressed it up really nice, might get a 9.4, 9.6, and that's kind of my guess. There's some other defects here, so you can see a finger bend there. There's what looks like maybe a fingerprint right up in here, a very light fingerprint, another finger bend right there, and a little bit bigger, deeper dent right there. So if one is looking only for that really high-grade book, even with the press, we probably can take care of these finger bends no problem, but we're not going to be able to fill in the clear white in the spine here. And so that one I might put on the decline pile, at least as it currently sits right now. So this book here is, another really nice high-grade copy. You can see it has a little bit of a scratch right here that, again, is apparent in that raking glare. Some of that might come out in the press. Some of it might not, depending on how deep that is and if it goes into gloss or not. You can see a little bit of a tick right there, a little bit of a tick right there that are evident. And again, you can see the white pop on through. If you flip it on over, though, the rest of this book is pretty nice. And I think there's a decent chance of getting this one through CGC at the 9.6 grade with 2 really small spine ticks. And so I think that one is a good candidate to slab if you're looking at that 9.6 threshold. This comic here has a lot of finger bends in this area, so you can see them right there, right there, right there, right there, right there. Now, some of these will, or at least should, press out. The place where you get in trouble are really deep ones like this one. That likely goes into the gloss of the paper and might even go into the color. And unfortunately, because it's scrunched up, I won't be able to tell that until I flatten it out. And you might have some damage underneath there that's hidden because it's all crunched up at the moment. But you can see that there's more spine lines, and there's definitely some scratches here on the surface. And so this one I think is going to be a tough one to get up to that 9.6 threshold. Even if we press out all those finger bends, again, there is a spine line right here. You can see right there, and there's a spine line right there, and there's a couple other really minor defects. So this one I would put in the optimistic pile, depending on how good the press comes out, but it might be a tough sell, partially because those defects are quite deep. But the good news is the spine and the corners look quite sharp, and so that should be okay. This one's kind of in the same boat, and it has a finger bend right there, kind of, yeah, right there. You can see it. If you flip it on over, it has a clear spine tick right here, and some spine ticking right down here, and another one right here by the 399. So you can see it right there. Now, some of those do not break color and should press out quite nice. A couple of them might not press out, and there's a little bit, so this is not residue stuck there. You can kind of see that dull space in the glare. That is color rub, where the comic sitting on top of this one rubbed against it and kind of just rubbed through the gloss. Nevertheless, I think that one could probably make a 9.6, hopefully. Next one up here, we got some spine ticks again, right down the spine right there. One right there, one right there, and one right there. So a very small set of spine ticks, nothing too crazy though. And again, you know, after some pressing, CGC is usually pretty forgiving on a couple of really light spine ticks. Where they're not forgiving is when you can see them from a little ways away. So if you have to zoom in and see them right under that glare, like right there, that's a lot harder to see, but if I flatten it out, you don't see them, and so those will probably be okay. This one might get dinged for some wear down here by the bottom corner, you can see, and again, depending on how the press goes, it might be what they call a crease. That might be into the glare or into the gloss. Again, that's really hard to see if it's a really fine break or a crease. They have revised their scale, and now if it goes through the gloss and you see that line in the glare, that is a crease, and it's treated the same if it breaks color or not. Lady Death is a popular book here, and this one I think is in pretty nice shape. Could use a press based on some of the light bends here on the back. You can see some up here. Hopefully we can get all that out. Depending on how CGC views this corner, right there, that'll determine the overall grade of this book. To me, that looks like a manufacturing thing, but I know people on moderns are especially harsh on some of those defects. So, but I would at least gamble with this one. You can see on over here that there's another finger bend we have to get out, and that's kind of in the same ball of wax. So here we go, a nice, little bit older Amazing Spider-Man from the front cover. Looks incredibly sharp, very nice spine. Bottom corner looks good. Bottom corner looks good. I think this one falls apart on the back, and it's a very, very little defect right down here, because that looks like a chip out. That to me is more than a binding tear, especially on a modern book. Let's see if I get the camera to zoom in there. And I did open this one on up, and it is quite subtle, but you can actually see the page on the interior, that little dab of green. And so I think that's going to get hit as being a tear, and will likely keep that one from being a very high-grade book. This ASM 510 here, another finger bend right there. Hopefully that'll come out in the press. It'll probably leave a dot, because again, that looks like a pretty deep crease right in there. And you can definitely see the stacking curl over here on the open edge, so hopefully that'll press out. But other than that, the corner and the spine look pretty sharp on this one, nothing too alarming. And so this one, I think, again, is a good candidate to hit that 9.6 threshold. So we'll go ahead and put that one in that pile. The book here, this one is the ASM 333. So this is that era between McFarlane and Bagley with Larson. Not a ton of issues, not a super long run. From the front, you know, it looks super sharp. But here is some evidence of why you want to look in a glare. So right here is a finger bend, which again, hopefully will press out, no problem. But what's ultimately going to cost this book is this top corner. And if you look right across that marble corner, there is a crease, and that does break color. So you can see the white right above the M in the marble, and you can see it go through the black right there. And it is a very, very faint color break, but it is a very real color break. And so that's going to get flagged as a corner crease, and that's going to limit this book probably to an 8.5 would be my guess. And you can see some more wear on the back. So even if we didn't have that, this tick itself would limit us to a 9.6, and there's some more ticks down here. So this one, I think, to me is going to be a difficult one to justify slabbing if we're looking for those very, very high grades. Violator 1 here. This one I think will make a 9.6. It is you know, going to be challenging to press that one out. So that one looks like it breaks color to me right there. You can see a little bit of white through that space. There's a couple more ticks down here, but those do not break color. And so I think this one will hit a 9.6 after a press. And so that one's a good candidate for that. We3 here. This one is going to depend on the quality of the press. So the biggest defect on this one is this top corner. You can see that there's a pretty big bend and crease in there. If we are lucky, that'll press out. If we are unlucky, it's going to stay, and again, it will have broken gloss. And that's going to be too difficult to detect without the press. So this is one of these things where you kind of have to gamble and go for it or not. But without that, the spine looks really sharp. There is a little bit of color rub right down here, all the way down to the bottom edge. And so even with that, we'd probably be looking at a 9.6, even if we get that corner out. I put it at about 50-50 that corner comes out as we'd like. The We3 here one, you know, again, from the front cover here, it looks super sharp. And you can see right in here, there's a bend. Now that bend should press out, but what is unfortunate is if you look for the complementary side of that bend, right here, you can see it in the glare. And if you look straight down at that, you can see the white line through there. And that white line is going to be a color breaking crease that is going to prevent that book from being higher than a 9.0. All right, ASM 317 here. So this is in the McFarlane Cup era. It always cracks me up when people want the newsstand version of these McFarlane ASMs because the direct copies come with free McFarlane art in the corner. Who wouldn't love that? So at least in my opinion, I get the direct copies, partially because I'm cheap, but also partially because you get a free Venom sketch or a free Spider-Man sketch in the corner. All right, so this one, again, on its surface looks really nice. Not a ton going on. But if we flip it on over, this is where the spine is gonna, I think, wreck the grade. So we've got, you know, a bunch of spine ticks here, some of which are deeper than others. But if we count, there's definitely, you know, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So this is a pretty tattered spine. You can see all the finger bends there. Now these finger bends, especially on the late 80s, early 90s books, tend to come out really awesome. So I'm not worried about any of these finger bends. What I am worried about are all of those lines you can see on the spine, and that's going to keep it from being, again, a high grade book. Additionally, there is a little bit of corner damage here, and it's unclear to me if that is a true corner crease or if it's just a little bit of color rub. Unfortunately, a corner crease is a pretty big grade ding, whereas a little bit of color rub is not super serious. Either way, though, I think we're going to put that one in the, you know, not above a 9.0 category. This one here with the ASM 330, so again, we're in that Larson era between McFarlane and Bagley. Looks pretty nice. There's a little bit of a bend up top. That should press out just okay. The spine on this one looks a lot better. The corners look pretty crisp. If we flip it on over, there is a little bit of yellow in here, but that to me is ink from the other issues. And so a lot of these issues have that yellow. As long as it's like canary yellow and not discolored brown, that is ink from another issue, and it won't be impact the grade, I don't think. So this one should press up. I don't think it's going to make a 9.8 because if we look very closely here, and there we'll have a 2 very spine ticks, but I think it'll make a 9.6, so that'll be a good one. ASM 332, same era. Again, free art in the corner. Who doesn't like that? This one, again, on the surface looks really nice, but I think if you give it a closer inspection, you're going to be able to see that it has some damage up here on the corner, and that's not a binding tear. That is actually corner crease or spine stress lines. You can see, again, if you hold it on its side, you can see right here, there's a spine tick, there's a spine tick, there's a spine tick, there's a spine tick, and there's a spine tick. So again, a number of spine ticks there, and that's okay. These deeper indents, I don't think that these are gripper problems. I think something actually pushed into this book right there, kind of on the edge right there by Spider-Man. You can see both of them. And I think those are actually going to be defects. And again, on the back here, you can see some color rubs. So if you look straight at it down, you can see that where something had rubbed up against this and taken some color off. That's one of the reasons, again, where you don't just drop the comic into a bag and board. You want to put the comic on the board and slide it into a bag to prevent that color rub. But you can see that. In addition, there's a little bit of tearing around this staple. So that staple tear by itself is probably going to limit to a 9.2-ish. So I'll put that one in the decline category. Here is another copy. This is the newsstand version of it. And if we look down at the newsstand logo, we can see that there is a corner crunch right there. So there's actually 2 lines. They both break color, and there's not much we're going to be able to do with the color break. And there's going to be another crease up here right through the Marvel E. You can see that line. So those creases are going to really impact the grade. And if you flip this one on over, especially right in here, you can see all that damage. And you can see the white lines if you deflect the glare. And so again, that is all going to be creasing. Nothing you can do about that creasing with a press. You know, if you don't see the white in that space, you might be able to press it out. But if you can see that white, you know, especially right here, that's a crease all day. Just one of those is going to limit you to an 8.5. So that's a super big bummer. Here's another true modern. Again, very light spine stress lines, does not break color right there, and the glare right there is another one. So this one, I think after a press will hopefully hit that 9.6 threshold again. You know, we have one true spine tick right there that does break color, but most of them do not. And I'm optimistic after a press that'll hit a 9.6, so that's pretty good. Superman 66 here, got some light rippling up top. That's pretty standard for books of this era. The spine was really clean when I felt this over, and this one might hit a 9.8, at least based on the front. If we flip it on over, you know, and scroll down, what might keep it from being a 9.8, again, is this color rub right by the staple. So depending on how severe that is and how CGC views it as either manufacturing or a defect, it's kind of a gray zone. But to me, this might keep it to being a 9.6 just with that color rub right by that staple. But that's our threshold, so that means that one's going to go right there. And some number 512. You know, all in all, again, on the front cover, it looks pretty good. But it's going to have a very, very, very small corner crease right there that you can see. It's going to have a very, very, very small corner crunch right there. You can just see that blunting that goes in. Those are going to keep it, you know, down a little bit. And you can see it on the back cover here too. So a little bit, and unfortunately right there you can see where it breaks the color and the glare. And so these are going to be actual corner creases. Would be okay at a high grade, but again, it's both on the top and the bottom corner on the front and the back cover, and so I don't think CGC is going to miss both of those, and so I think that book is going to be closer to a 9.2 grade as it sits even after a press. And by the way, for all this grading, I imagine these as being post-pressed grades. All these little defects compound further pre-press. This one's going to be the same, so it's going to have some wear up in this top corner. You can see where it's kind of blunted up there. That's a little bit more than manufacturing in my mind. And you can see, you know, the rest of this actually looks really good. The spine on this book looks fantastic. But if we flip it on over right there, that little bit of a corner crease that you can see that white line, that's going to be enough to keep it to a 9.0. It's a very, very small crease, but it's real. It's probably a 1/4 inch. Maybe it's, you know, 3/8, or maybe a little bit smaller than that, I guess. But nevertheless, that is a true color breaking corner crease. And so that's going to keep us out of that 9.6, 9.8 threshold on that book. Last one here is one of the best covers, I think, from the Larson run of ASM here. Venom's just looking to eat Spider-Man. Who doesn't love that? This book, you know, I really wish this one were a slightly higher grade because I love it. But if you hold it right here, you can see a lot of ticks, and those are all color breaking. And so because of that, there's nothing that the press can do to add that black ink back. Those are always going to be there. You can flatten the paper out, but you're not going to be able to put that ink back in, and you're going to be able to see it down here too. So, you know, like all of this rippling here, you can flatten it out, but you can see right where the paper is damaged right there, and right there, and right there. And so that's actually going to be what's limiting. And so this one, even after a press, I think is going to come in closer to a 9.0. Just due to the number of spine ticks that are visible. It doesn't have anything else horribly wrong with it, but it is going to have, you know, quite a few spine ticks and spine lines down here. So, all right, so that's this pre-screen. Hopefully you found it helpful, and, you know, check those spines, check the back corners, and really look for that color rub along the rear spine if you're considering a 9.8 pre-screen. Please do like, subscribe, and follow. I appreciate it. Find Top Comics on Facebook and Instagram, and recommend to a friend for me. All right.